This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Why are kung fu movies so patriotic? In particular, why are we always punching karate people? Some of you may answer history or World War II, which is fair enough. Much of modern Chinese identity is heavily shaped by the century of humiliation, in which China was exploited by colonialism. The loss of Hong Kong to the British Empire and the Japanese invasion of World War II are two of the biggest sore spots for Chinese people. But why kung fu? In fact, kung fu films didn't used to be like that, and it's rare to see a patriotic kung fu film these days, so there's definitely more going on in this genre than just history. Today, let's examine the rise and fall of kung fu cinema, find out what and who started this trend, why it was such a common theme in kung fu movies, and what brought an end to the patriotic subgenre. This is the history of patriotic kung fu cinema. It was the 1960s. Hong Kong was in the middle of a wuxia mania. Author Jin Yong was on a roll, releasing stories after stories that would come to define modern Chinese literature. Caught by this craze, martial arts cinema in Hong Kong generally explores the same theme, be it the philosophy of martial arts or the love, hate, and bloodshed of foot heroes. We have Come Drink With Me, a 1966 story about a woman on a mission to kill the bandit king and rescues her brother. One-Armed Swordsman is a 1967 movie about a swordsman overcoming his disability and uses his unique fighting skill to protect his clan. There is, of course, the Wong Fei Hung serial, which has like 80 movies, featuring the titular folk hero fighting anything from northern Chinese fighters to giant gorillas. The point is, back in the 1960s, it was unheard of for a kung fu movie to have a patriotic tone. Even when a kung fu film is set during a time of national crisis, the story is generally unconcerned with national events. But then, the impact Fists of Fury made on Hong Kong cinema cannot be overstated. For one thing, it's a Bruce Lee movie. With his acting career started in the US and his later starring role in Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee was the first Chinese man to become an international star, and he looked like this. After a century of humiliation, suddenly Chinese people have a living proof that Chinese men can also be strong and fierce. If there was one person who could rile up the Chinese spirit, it would be Bruce Lee, and rile up he did.
中國人唔係病夫。
To this day, this line remains one of, if not the most famous quote in Chinese cinematic history. Beyond that, Bruce Lee also changed kung fu. Take a look at the older wuxia movies. In older films, kung fu is an extension of the opera tradition. They are performative acrobatics, more symbolic than they are realistic. It's a coded way of expressing the idea of fighting. It's fighting without the violence. Then comes Bruce Lee, trained in combat-oriented martial arts. His visceral violence transformed the perception of kung fu from a circus trick into a weapon. He gave Chinese people something to rival karate and judo. And he did just that. Again and again. That's why you always see kung fu versus karate, because Bruce Lee did it. Finally, it's worth noting that this new wave of patriotic films were made by filmmakers who experienced the effects of colonialism firsthand. The director of Fists of Fury, Lo Wei, for example, lived through World War II in the mainland, then moved to Hong Kong in 1948. For the next 2 decades, Hong Kong saw a series of riots launched by communist supporters against the British colonial government. That's why a lot of these films involve punching Japanese invaders and occasionally fighting off European colonizers. What you are seeing here are lifelong frustrations experienced by these filmmakers. With all of these reasons combined, It's no wonder why Fist of Fury became such a massive success. From then on, an increasing number of kung fu films and TV shows would copy its formula, fighting for the pride of the Chinese people around the world, including this one. That is not a joke. Before we continue, I'd like to take a minute to talk about my website about Drunken Fist vs. Cthulhu, a new take on the old folk hero genre. And thanks to Squarespace, I can show up my crazy idea to the world. With Squarespace, you can easily create a professional-looking website with a catalog of amazing-looking templates. The edit is quick and easy, with no need for downloads or plugins ever. And the result not only looks great, but adds to the legitimacy of your ideas, brands, or products. Start your free trial at squarespace.com/accentercinema and use the code accentercinema to get 10% off your first purchase. Whether you are an artist in need of publicity or you have a project in need of funding, having a website is the best way to show it off. Visit squarespace.com/accentercinema and make your voices heard today. Enter the 90s. Once Upon a Time in China revived the folk hero genre. If Fist of Fury planted the seed, this is the flower that bloomed. Featuring Jet Li as Wang Feiheng, this is nothing like the old silly black and white serial. Instead of monkey business, Wang Feiheng would fight American human traffickers, help establish the Republic of China, and help build Chinatown in San Francisco. Wang Feiheng was no longer just a folk hero, he became a national hero. The tradition of making up with historical figures continues. Other films like Drunken Master 2 would follow, where Wang Feiheng fights against Western invaders stealing Chinese national treasures. The East is Red, which is a wuxia film rather than a kung fu film, pitted its hero against the Spanish fleet and Japanese pirates. After being adapted into part of a TV show in the 80s, Fist of Fury was remade again, twice, once on TV, featuring Donnie Yen and his muscles. Even Stephen Chow's own kung fu comedy pitted Chinese kung fu against Japanese karate. It's another golden age for Hong Kong kung fu cinema, but this prosperity may have been just a bubble. As we all know, by the end of the decade, Hong Kong cinema would undergo a drastic decline. The reasons for the fall are a bit too complicated for this video, but there are a few that are worth discussing. In the 90s, art house cinema rose into prominence in both Taiwan and mainland China, discussing topics that are more interesting to the local people. Hong Kong blockbusters were already on shaky ground. Domestic interests have been declining since the 80s, so losing these markets were devastating. At the same time, the traditional ethnic Chinese identity was shifting in all three regions. Mainland China was seeing the effects of the economic reform. As China opens up to the outside world, new generations grew to love Japanese anime. The horror of World War II was fading away from the public consciousness. Meanwhile, with the lifting of martial law in 1987, the decades-long White Terror come to an end in Taiwan. Taiwan will see its first ever opposition victory in 2000. Kuomintang, which was rooted more in the ethnic Chinese identity, was replaced by the Democratic Progressive Party, a party that's more Taiwanese. The collective identity of the Taiwanese people would go through a parallel change as well. Of course, the biggest shift probably happened in Hong Kong. With the 97 handovers, the century-long British rule came to an end. Younger filmmakers who were born and raised in Hong Kong no longer based their identity on the century of humiliation. And remember, at the time, Hong Kong and the mainland was still on friendly terms, so without an oppressor, the use of kung fu to rile up patriotism stops making sense. Enter the new millennia, Hollywood began making better and bigger kung fu films. Some of them were made by Hong Kong choreographers, but most are just made by fans of the genre, a new generation of filmmakers. Oh, and Thailand too. Damn, that's awesome. While martial arts cinema continues in Hong Kong, the association with the Chinese identity was pretty much all gone. For the most part, wuxia films went back to the world of heroic bloodshed. And kung fu films like Fearless, while still set during a time of national turmoil, focuses much more on the heroic self-discovery. Donnie Yen's SPL, Flashpoint, and more recently Raging Fire are all police action flicks with no real national identity to speak of. We have looped back to the 1960s. The only successful film that still followed the Fist of Fury formula was Ip Man. And I think most people like it for the new Wing Chun action, not for its patriotic message. And for every success, there was a ton more failure. There's Legend of the Fist, a sequel to Fists of Legend, which itself was a remake of Fist of Fury. While the film has some stylish action, the story, the character, and the message no longer resonates with the audience. As the review goes, the clumsy Chinese nationalism is tedious. Eventually, even the Ip Man series broke away from the cliché, which ended up making a very unique sequel, Ip Man 3. Too bad the series took a step back in its final and admittedly unnecessary fourth film. In university, I took two very similar sounding courses. One is called Film History, which is mandatory for film students, and the other is History of Film, which is an elective from the history department. Turns out the latter isn't about studying movies, but rather learning history through the lens of cinema. And that is what we just did today. Film is just another form of text. While it may not provide objective insights into past events, Wang Feihong never fought a gorilla, I'm pretty sure, it is one of the best ways to learn about the subjective, how people at the time see things, how they interpret things. We see how the old Chinese identity formed, how it was popularized, and how it faded from people's consciousness. We see what kind of hero people desired and why they desired it. Remember the question we asked at the beginning of the video? Why are Kung Fu movies so patriotic? Next time, when you have a similar question, look at the film closer and examine the history surrounding it. There's usually a fascinating answer waiting for you to discover.